Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder if there is a difference in how we see good and bad people, and if that difference has anything to do with gender? Well, stick around because today we're diving into a fascinating new study that suggests moral goodness itself might be seen as feminine. This is pretty mind-blowing stuff. We often hear about gender stereotypes, but this research goes a step further, asking if our very idea of a morally good person is gendered. The researchers looked at faces, traits, behaviors, and overall impressions, and their findings were consistent across the board. They found that when people think of a morally good person, the face that pops into their mind is often a woman's face. Let's break down how they figured this out. Basically, the study's abstract, which is like a mini summary of the whole paper, tells us that women are consistently judged as more caring and communal than men. And this research found that moral goodness itself is feminine. This means that at the level of faces, traits, and even how we form impressions of people, there is this strong link between being morally good and being thought of as female. So, how did they test this idea about faces? They used a really cool technique called reverse correlation. Imagine looking at a blurry image and trying to guess what it is. In study 1, participants looked at faces that had random noise added to them. They had to decide if each face belonged to a morally good or morally bad person. After doing this many times, the researchers could combine all the faces participants labeled as morally good and create an average face and do the same for morally bad. And guess what? When they showed these average faces to a new group of people, the face representing a morally good person was overwhelmingly seen as a woman's face, and the morally bad face was seen as more masculine. This suggests our internal mental picture of someone good is feminine. The researchers didn't stop there. They asked people to rate these synthesized faces on different traits. The morally good face was seen as more feminine, more caring, and more fair. The morally bad face was seen as more powerful and less compliant, like someone more agentic or assertive. This first study really sets the stage. It shows that our very mental representations of moral goodness lean feminine. It is like our brains automatically associate being good with being female. This goes beyond just general positive feelings towards women, which has been observed in other research. This is specifically about morality. Next, they wanted to see if this idea played out when people described others. In study 2A, they used the profile generation task. Participants were asked to create profiles of different people by allocating certain traits. For example, they might have had to decide how loyal or disloyal a person was. After creating a profile, they were asked if they had a man or a woman in mind for that profile. What they found was that when participants conceived of a woman, they tended to assign more morally positive and compliant traits to the profile. On the flip side, when they thought of a man, the profiles were rated as more rough, challenging, and rule-breaking. This suggests that even when creating fictional characters or general profiles, our gender associations influence how we assign moral qualities. Study 2B took this a step further by manipulating the gender. They presented participants with profiles of an average man and an average woman and asked them to rate these profiles on a range of traits, including moral ones. The results were pretty clear. Average women were rated as significantly more morally good than average men. This held true for a composite score of moral traits, and on many individual moral traits like caring, kindness, and fairness. Interestingly, they didn't find the same effect for fictional characters, which the authors suggest might be because fiction allows for more deviation from stereotypes. But for real-world impressions, women come out on top when it comes to moral goodness. Okay, so we have faces and traits, but what about actual behaviors? Study 3 analyzed a massive database of thousands of behaviors. Participants rated these behaviors on how feminine or masculine they were, as well as how morally relevant, positive, and trustworthy they seemed. Here is where it gets really interesting. They found a significant positive correlation between how morally good a behavior was rated and how stereotypically feminine it was. In simple terms, the more morally good an action was considered, the more it was seen as feminine, and this association held up even when they controlled for other factors like sociability or intelligence. Trustworthiness, often considered a key part of morality, also showed the same pattern. More feminine behaviors were seen as more trustworthy. Finally, study 4 looked at how our impressions change when someone violates moral expectations. This is about diagnosticity, how much a behavior tells you about someone's character. The researchers hypothesized that if people believe women are morally superior, then a moral transgression by a woman should be more damaging to her reputation than the same transgression by a man. And that is exactly what they found. Participants updated their impression of a person's moral goodness much more negatively for women than for men when they committed the exact same minor moral transgression, like stealing money from a tip jar. It means that the single mistake has a bigger negative impact on how we judge a woman's moral character compared to a man's. It is like women have a higher bar to clear, and falling from it is more dramatic. So, what is the big takeaway from all this? The researchers conclude that moral goodness is indeed gendered. We represent the face of goodness as female. We assign more morally good traits to women. Morally good behaviors are seen as feminine. And a single moral slip-up is more costly for a woman's reputation. This is a really complex and important finding. It suggests that while benevolent sexism might paint women as morally superior, there is a downside, an even higher expectation, and a harsher judgment when those expectations are not met. This could explain why women might feel more constrained when it comes to asserting agency, as going against moral rules could impact their perceived goodness more severely. Now, like any research, there are limitations. The studies were primarily conducted in the US, so cultural differences could play a role. Also, the why behind these perceptions isn't fully explored. Are these just reflections of everyday experiences, or is there something deeper at play? The researchers mentioned that these perceptions might be influenced by prescriptive norms, not just descriptive ones, meaning we have an idea of what women should be, and that influences how we see them. This research opens up so many questions. It makes you think about how deeply ingrained gender stereotypes are, and how they can subtly shape our understanding of fundamental concepts like morality. It also raises the interesting point that maybe men avoid certain behaviors not because they aren't intrinsically moral, but because morality is heavily associated with femininity, and that might not align with traditional masculine ideals. What do you all think about these findings? Does it resonate with your own experiences or observations? Let me know in the comments below. It is truly fascinating to see how our social perceptions can be so deeply influenced by gender. If you found this breakdown helpful and want to explore more mind-bending psychology research, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, and ring that notification bell so you don't miss our next video. Until then, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep your minds open.